Yarn, yarn, and more yarn. Math count. Every year during the holiday season, Mary knits gifts for her relatives. This year, she plans to make one hat for her cousin, one scarf and hat for her grandmother, two pairs of socks for her grandfather, two hats and a scarf for her mother, a hat and two pairs of socks for her father. Each hat requires one ball of yarn. Each scarf requires 3 balls of yarn, and each pair of socks requires 1.5 balls of yarn. What is the minimum number of balls of yarn Mary must have to complete all the knitted gifts she intends to make? Well, first what we need to find is how much of each type of clothing she made. So then we can add that with this almost like chart right here of how much yarn each type of clothing costs. So let's see how much hats she has, how much scarves she has, socks. You know what? Scarf and sock. How much socks she has. And that's it. Okay. So let's see how much hats she has. Well, this year she plans to make one hat for her cousin. Okay, one scarf and hat for her grandmother. One hat, one scarf for her grandmother. Two pairs of socks. Two pairs of socks. Okay, so each pair is this much. So how much pairs? How much pairs? 2. So 2 pairs of socks for her grandfather. 2 hats and one scarf for her mother, and one hat and 2 pairs of socks for her father. Okay, so over here it's 5, 2, and 4. Now all we have to do is multiply. So each hat requires 1 ball of yarn. That would be 5 times 1 plus. Each scarf requires 3 balls of yarn, so 3 times the number of scarves, which is 2. Plus 4 times, how much does one pair of sock require? 1.5. So 1.5 times 4. So 1 times 5 is just 5, plus 6, plus 6 as well. After, you do 17. So the minimum number of balls of yarn Mary must have to complete all knitted gifts she intends to make is 17 balls of yarn. And make sure to answer with a label as well, with word problems especially. Okay, so I'm gonna shrink this. Alright. Now let's see the next problem. After completing the hats, scarves, and socks, Mary decides to make a very special holiday blanket. This blanket requires 1,300 yards of yarn. 200 of these yards should be one color. You know what? I'm going to use a different color for this. 200 of these yards should be one color. 800 yards should be a second color. And the remaining should be a third color. Unfortunately, she used up all the yarn she had purchased for the gift she made earlier, so she heads to the craft store to buy more yarn. The balls of yarn sold at her local craft store contain 150 yards of yarn. If yarn is only sold in whole balls, how many balls of yarn will she need to complete this project? Okay. So, okay, and I forgot to highlight this one. It also says that yarn is only sold in whole balls. So, let's see. Let's first think of, so there's 1,300 yards of yarn. Well, it talks about like how much colors each of these have, but that doesn't really matter in this case. It's just asking for how much yarn, and we don't need to know the color. So that's extra information that we don't need. So then we can do 1,300 divided by 150. For me, I'm just going to use fractions so I can easily just cancel stuff out. So cross out the zeros. Each of these are divisible by 5, so this becomes a 3. This becomes 26. Now we have 26 divided by 3. 26 divided by 3 would be, that would be 8, because 3 times 8 is 24 with a remainder of 2. Sorry. So this is the answer. Or is it? Because it says that yarn is only sold in whole balls. So it's important to always reread the question after you do all the math to make sure you solved it correctly. So it's 8 with a remainder of 2. But that's not really the answer, is it? Because it's in whole balls. So to actually include the extra remainder of 2, we'll just need 9 balls of yarn. And even though there are some extra, well, she could use it. So that is the second part of this challenge, of this week's challenge in Math Count. Okay, last question.